I'd like to call the June 3rd, 2014 Papillion City Council meeting to order. Mrs. Butler, would you please take the roll?
Florence, Mumgard, Gaines, Glover, Jaworski, Klug, Stubbe, Ingberg.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
That is correct.
A current copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the City Council chambers. Just give people an update on the weather. Just saw it at about 7:45. The next round is supposed to hit Ashland, and it's not going to be nice necessarily. So we're going to push through the council meeting a little bit quicker on some of the comments. So Dan probably asked for an abbreviated administrator's report, and I'll do probably no wrap-up comments. If there is an emergency, we will go to the basement, and if you're not familiar with the building, they're down by the main south door on the right side is the door down there, and we are monitoring the weather. Dan, administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the only thing I would advise the council of then would be that if you weren't aware, Laura Jean O'Connor's retiring as a city employee. Yes, we'll be getting information out later this month on her ceremony. So that concludes my report.
Appreciate it. The written report is in the packet, so if you got any questions, reach out. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilwoman Klug, second by Councilman Jaworski. Do we have Mr. Ingberg?
I'd like to pull C5 from the consent agenda.
C5 is pulled. Do we have any proponents on the balance of it? Any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item C5, Resolution R140088, a resolution to approve an agreement to lease public right-of-way to allow Yoakum Precast Concrete, Inc. to lease a 136-foot strip of Grunther Street public right-of-way in order to build, locate, and operate a guardrail system. Do we have a motion to approve item C5, Resolution R140088? Motion by Councilman Glover. Second by Councilman Gaines. Proponents. Do we have any opponents? Council discussion, Mr. Ingberg.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to substitute motion to amend C5 as it relates to the insurance coverage. I believe the top end was $5 million, and considering the fact that Mr. Yoakum is putting in a highway speed type rail there, and the fact that we've done $3 billion previously with these types of projects, and the fact that the cable companies that we do business with have right of way throughout our entire city. We charge them $5 million. Here we're talking 100 feet. So I guess I would, for council consideration, and as long as legal counsel has no objection, of course. I never want to get on their bad side. To change that $5 million amount to $3 million, I think that'd be more than adequate coverage for the city.
I will ask legal for an opinion when we get to the discussion if there's a second. So the motion is to amend the $5 million to $3 million. Do we have a second? Second by Councilwoman Klug. Discussion on that. Mr. Mumgard. Well, let me ask Mrs. Rupiper to comment first.
I just wanted to explain where those limits came from. Within the last year and a half or so, we've been in touch with our insurance carrier, and they have recommended that when we enter into these contracts that we have those individuals or companies matching the coverages required by LARM. I will say that if we reduce that $5 million general aggregate amount, the liability is still the liability. When something goes wrong in terms of multiple occurrences, if there's a gap, the city will end up covering that. So anyway, I just wanted to explain that's where that comes from.
Have there been examples where we have lowered that in the last year or so?
We do have some examples, and I think for the larger corporations that do extensive business throughout the city, it may be easier for them. I think it has been more difficult for the smaller businesses to be able to cover that.
Mr. Mumgard.
Well, okay, I'm not following along with Mr. Ingberg's rationale because I don't think it has anything to do with the distance at all. It's the risk that's presented. And there's very little risk presented by a cable company, a cable that's buried in the ground. Whereas what we're talking about here is a situation where this guardrail went in because of the identified risk that actually happened. A truck got loose and went over the edge, went down the hill and into the playground. That could happen again. And that's why Mr. Yoakum, I assume, is ready to put the guardrail in there. He doesn't want to have the risk that that'll happen. And I guess I look at it and say, well, what risk is the city taking? And I think very little. If we don't put that guardrail in, and this happens, heaven forbid that happened, would the city be sued? Would we be liable? And I'm thinking, in my mind, I suspect it would be a long shot that the city would be liable because we didn't protect the school district's property. So I look at it that, well, who benefits from this guardrail? It's Mr. Yoakum and the school district. It really isn't the city. So as the council has pointed out, if we lessen this, we're taking on a risk of liability in releasing Mr. Yoakum from a degree, 2 million degree of liability risk. You know, and I appreciate that Mr. Yoakum is doing this mostly at our request and because he's a good citizen. And so I'm willing to cut him a break. But then on the other hand, I would suggest that if we do this, we approach the school district and see about their interest in covering the risk that Mr. Yoakum is not covering, because it really doesn't seem that the taxpayers ought to cover it when the benefit is both to Mr. Yoakum and to the school district, that those are the two parties that ought to cover the risk. So I'll go along and basically give Mr. Yoakum a break because he's doing something good and something we wanted. But I don't think that we should then just ignore it and continue to shoulder that extra. And, you know, and how much risk, well, who knows? We can all envision a scenario where, you know, 5 kids would be tragically harmed by a truck getting loose and crossing the playground. So, and all of a sudden you got $5 million worth of damages. Will that happen? Who the heck knows? But it shouldn't be on the shoulders of the taxpayers of the city of Papillion. It should be on somebody else. So I'll go along with it, but I think we need to have some follow-up.
Based on that, if the amendment does pass, we will take an action item to reach out to the school. Ms. Klug.
Thank you. I'm going to absolutely vote for this the way Councilman Ingberg has done it. I think Trumbull Park's been there for over 50 years now. Mr. Yoakum has been there with his business longer than that. This is the first time that the incident happened, and one time is too often, but we've already taken the right approach. Mr. Yoakum's put in a highway grade rail to stop a truck that will roll 60 to 70 feet before it would hit it should one get loose again. I just think that he's doing the right thing. He's put in the railing at his own cost. He's going to be putting in the insurance. I do greatly appreciate Councilman Mumgard's suggestion, though, about the partnershiping. Thank you.
Mr. Ingberg.
I understand your concern, Councilman Mumgard. I certainly don't have your legal acumen, and I'm not an attorney such as you, but here's what I was looking at, kind of like Councilwoman Klug mentioned. I tried to be a little more reasonable, I guess, if that's the right word. Looking at some other businesses, we've asked them to do $3 million, not $5 million, primarily because they've either cooperated or they've had difficulty getting more than $3 million coverage. So to me, as you said, I don't know what the exposure is, if it would ever happen again. But I think because he's made an effort and made it without any difficulty, or was very cooperative, and certainly himself does not ever want to have that risk again, it just seemed the reasonable thing to do to make it something that I'm sure that he was able to obtain, and at least I think cover most of what might occur. But hopefully what he's done, it will never occur again anyway.
Thank you. Mr. Glover.
I have 2 questions. One, do we know what the difference is in the cost of the insurance from $3 million to $5 million?
I don't think we do, because that would have been a quote to him, not to the city.
I just wondered if he shared that, means
Not that I'm aware of.
means he asked. The other thing is, have we had discussions with him about what appropriate equipment should be setting there for the potential of an accident?
When the incident first came up, the whole situation went to the nuisance board, and they did have those conversations of what's there, what's the policy of how it's how does he block those trucks, how are the trucks parked, what type of equipment is there. They did have all of that discussion.
So
I'm not on the nuisance board, but if somebody from it wants to share, is that accurate? Okay.
So there was extensive concerns relayed in terms of the type of equipment that was.
Mr. Hoynes.
The only thing I'd add, Councilman Glover, is that Mr. Yoakum did indicate that he within the next 5 years he would probably be out of the business, and we had discussion about not having that as a continuing use or not allowing that, and he seemed agreeable to that. That we would, at least staff would object him selling that for the same purpose. So when he's done, the issue's resolved.
And then the other part kind of maybe relates to our engineer is the railing that's being put up substantial enough when a truck rolls across the street and hits it to stop it from going over?
Yes, it is, Councilman Glover. It's actually designed for 60-mile-an-hour design speed for a 4,400-pound unit, so it's sufficient enough to stop any type of construction equipment that would be placed on the property.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mumgard.
Yeah, I'm just going to climb up on the soapbox for the bigger picture, and I guess I'm probably speaking to people who aren't going to listen anyhow. But the $5 million number comes because that's the per occasion risk that the legislature has imposed upon cities. That, I mean, to their benefit, they gave us a limit that you can't recover against a city more than $5 million in one incident. But it's been my experience that fairly regularly groups of people come to the legislature and get sympathetic ears for raising that. Because, oh my gosh, people are going uncompensated for their injuries. It's always a pleasure. It's always strikes me strange that when we get into these discussions and private citizens are involved, or smaller organizations, we hear, oh, they can't afford to buy the coverage. They can't afford to buy that insurance. But then some legislators seem to think that shouldn't be ever an issue for a city like us, whether it can be afforded or not. These are the same people apparently who complain about the cost of government. So next time somebody comes to the legislature and there's a proposal to raise that insurance limit, or raise that liability limit, I guess I'll remember this discussion and how once again we heard how unrealistic it is for people to even buy the $5 million. And I don't doubt that that's true. It's expensive for them just as it would be for us. And I'm always perplexed at how people in the legislature seem to think that that's not an issue. Thank you for listening to my soapbox.
Most in the legislature have not been at the local level legislating. Commentary. Mr. Florence.
Yeah, just on the subject of the insurance, what they really have is $1 million per occurrence and $5 million in aggregate. So what you're going to have is the off chance, as Councilman Klug said, that a truck rolls down again, so that'd be one incident on 136 feet versus some of the carriers who go throughout the city. So the chances of having multiple occurrences in a given year, it's probably pretty low. And so the $5 million really talks to the aggregate amount, not to the per incident. So I don't think we run a huge risk here, but I'm not an insurance person. We might want to look into that.
Mr. Jaworski.
You know, as I'm sitting here listening to everybody talk, I think Mr. Yoakum was there first, right? And then the school built. So why didn't the school put some precautions in there knowing that business was up there? In my mind, it should be half and half. He pays half and the school pays half. But if we go with 3, I'll support 3. But again, I don't know if this is all his problem. His business was there well before the school was.
Mr. You done? Okay. Any other discussion? Please vote on the motion to lower aggregate from 5 million to 3 million.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes, so the motion is amended. Is there any other discussion? Please vote on the motion as amended.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item E1, Ordinance 1692. An ordinance to approve the change of zone of certain real property within the zoning jurisdiction of the city of Papillion, Sarpy County, Nebraska, legally described as part of Tax Lot 8 in the south half of the southeast quarter, together with that part of Tax Lot 1 in the south half of the southwest quarter, all in Section 19, Township 14 North, Range 12 east of the 6 p.m., Sarpy County, Nebraska, generally located northeast of 126th Street and Lincoln Road, from agricultural AG to multifamily residential R4, to amend the official zoning map of the city of Papillion by changing the zoning district boundaries of the zoning map in accordance with Section 20532 of the Papillion Municipal Code, and to provide for an effective date. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Do we have proponents? And if you'd state your name for the record.
Good evening, John Bachman, 10250 Regency Circle. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Woodland Homes. This is the third phase of the North Shore subdivision, same zoning, same size lots. Planning Commission has given approval, planning staff has provided approval, and we request your approval this evening.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Next is item E2, Ordinance 1693. An ordinance to approve the change of zone of certain real property within the zoning jurisdiction of the city of Papillion, Sarpy County, Nebraska, legally described as Tax Lot B in the west half of the southeast quarter of Section 35, Township 14 North, Range 12 east of the 6 p.m., Sarpy County, generally located at 78th Street and Highway 370, from agricultural AG to mixed-use MU, to amend the official zoning map of the city of Papillion by changing the zoning district boundaries of the zoning map in accordance with Section 20532 of the Papillion Municipal Code, and provide for an effective date. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Do we have proponents? And if you'd state your name for the record.
I'm Doug Wilwarding with Tornado Car Wash, and just here to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Any other proponents? Any opponents? As long as they're here, any council questions? Mr. Mumgarden.
Yeah, why don't you come forward? Why do you want to put a car wash there?
We just think it's a good location and great service for that area.
Don't you
Being
think
that there is no other car wash around really for quite a while, or quite a ways.
Well, there is a car wash currently right next door to that.
This is actually a different model, and I can actually show you. Well, I had it on there. Never mind. There it is. This is the 370 corridor view. This is an express exterior wash. There'll be full-time employees there all the time. So it's quite a bit different model as opposed to the one that just sits up the hill there. I don't know if that answers your question or
Well,
not.
only partly. I'll tell you my concern.
Okay.
That is an area of land that sits next door to our shopping center, which we're very proud of, and which I would anticipate or hope would continue to be used for retail of some sort. It's got all that frontage along the highway, great stuff. And I sit and I ponder, well, why would we put a car wash there? A car wash can go about anywhere. That's a destination that people go to. They go to wash their car. It can be tucked back behind industrial buildings and people will find it. I know of some that are. And it just seems to me to be not the highest and best use of that land to put a car wash there when there's something that would eventually go into that land and serve the citizens much higher scale than a car wash, both in property taxes, sales tax, things like that. That's my concern. I'll give you a chance to address that.
Well, I guess from a the property tax and the sales tax, I can't see where we're going to be a lot different than anyone else there as far as what we'll be paying or anything else, because our facilities, it's top notch, and it will actually fit. We've designed it to fit everything that, I guess, the theme of Shadow Lake, you know, just to go along with everything there. And maybe this drawing I have up there is not real good, and I don't know if everybody's seen them like in color, but I'd gladly pass these photos around. So as far as a fit there, and as far as retail, I mean, I think it'll fit right in.
I guess I look at it that even though it may be the nicest car wash in the world, it still isn't going to generate the sales tax and the property tax, you know, that, you know, a Wendy's or a Burger King or something like that, pretty simple would be.
I can't answer what they generate. I really don't know.
Well, and I'm surmising. I don't either, but I know a car wash is a sporadic business. It's not something that operates full bore during the winter around here. And I don't minimize the importance of a car wash. I'm like anybody else, I use them also. I don't see how the existence of a car wash there would act as some sort of an incentive for offices or other retail to locate nearby, because it's not going to generate the kind of traffic that a lot of retail would. And those are my concerns. And I'm thinking, well, if we put the car wash there, are we somehow wasting a good opportunity?
Well, I really don't think so. And I'll answer that in this way. I mean, we've already spoken with Hy-Vee, and they've given us an approval letter because they are really wanting, they get asked by their customers all the time for this service, and they do not have it right now. So we will be co-oping with them. And we already have a site out west where we co-op with them. It works very well. So they're fired up about it. And as far as it being a destination point, yes, it is, and so is Shadow Lake. But so I think it will bring more people there. Whether they're there to get their car wash, well, they'll go do other things as well. It's a known fact that these couple well with salons, with grocery stores, with gas stations, with shopping. They do draw people to those types of town centers.
Thank you.
Mr. Jaworski.
I kind of look at this from a different way. I think it's a good spot where you're putting it for the simple reason you're at Shadow Lake. If I spend a whole day shopping and I'm tired and I'm lazy and I want my car washed, I'm going through that car wash. And there's going to be a lot of people, I think, that look at it the same way. So to me, I think it'll be a good fit as long as it follows our design standards, and I believe it does. So I think it's a good fit.
Mr. Ingberg.
Yeah, I look at this. I agree with Mr. Jaworski, but I wanted to ask our planning director a question, because when you're talking about retail, traditional retail versus a car wash, to me, at least the size they have indicated here of this plat for this car wash, it's really too small for most retail, I think, that we would think of as being a normal retail to put there. So I'm going to ask Mr. Sturzman if that's a fair assumption.
You're absolutely correct. This lot used to be railroad right-of-way, so it's long and narrow. I think it's 100 feet wide, and it also has a utility easement that runs through it. It's a fiber optic line, not so easy to move. And so you're right. It's a challenge to try to develop this lot, and the car wash, because it's kind of a long, narrow building, and because the way that they've laid out their site plan, it does fit. And so from that perspective, it was a good use for the site, just from a perspective of site plan and being able to fit something there. We have looked at other uses and have had a really hard time finding something to fit on that lot.
Mr. Florence.
You know, so I look at this and I think of all the places around town where you have car washes, and I think of the 370 corridor. And as I look at this, you know, you end up with the 370 corridor heavily commercial. Got nothing against car washes, I use them. I don't see it enhancing the area. I kind of agree with Councilman Mumgard. So I'd like to see something, you know, a little more in line with enhancing the corridor. When I also look at this, I think a car snaking up, you know, the road to do this and then back down, and I think, is it really suited for that? And my initial reaction is it's probably not. What do you think about the traffic?
Traffic flow? Mm-hmm. I think it makes sense there. I think it's located on that intersection. It's got great visibility. The ingress is, we got a very long waiting line. We can fit like 30 cars in our waiting area, and it just flows pretty evenly right through it.
Thank you.
Ms. Klug.
We talked about its location and that it is close to Shadow Lake. They do a great job aesthetically with like the trees, the upkeep and that. Noticed on your diagram there's a few trees on one side, and I believe the circle part is closest to 370, so the building's going to be a little bit further away, closer to the other road?
Correct.
Correct. So I guess my question is, I too worry about the way that Papillion looks as people drive to us, as they drive through us. They're going to be looking at the trees, they're going to be looking at that. When I think about a car wash, I know one of the things I do is I always get rid of the trash inside of my vehicles. Do you have plans and standards that you're going to be implementing to make sure that it is the right look for the people that are on 370?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time trying to make this really stand out, look really nice. I know everybody's used to driving around seeing car washes, the typical car wash, you know, a lot of clutter, a lot of trash, etc. Those are usually open 24 hours a day, so you're bringing people in all hours of the day and night. And so people are, you know, kind of free to do whatever they want after hours when there's nobody attending it. This one will have, it's just like a regular business. It's open, you know, opens in the morning, it closes at night, or closes at, you know, it's open 12 hours a day. And after that, you know, there's not going to be any activity on it. And that's when it'll be cleaned up. And I just don't see any problem in that regard.
It's clean throughout the day too, with attendance. I mean,
It'll be
very meticulous when it comes to that, like cigarette butts, bubble gum, I mean, anything.
Wrappers.
Even at our other spots, and those are 24 hours, and that's why we're switching to this model down here, is because that is a concern for the corridor. We realize that, and that is exactly why we're going with this model, so that once we're closed for the day, it's cleaned up and looking great again. And it should be looking that way all day long because we'll have people there, so.
So do you have an estimate of what times you're thinking it's going to be open?
Yeah, I think in the summer it would be open from 7 to 7, and in the winter it'd be open from 7 to 6.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mumgard.
Well, I guess I have a question for the planning director. I'm sitting and looking at it, and I understand that it's not the easiest parcel in the town to get something on, but it seems to be no different in width or quality than the lot on the other side of the road, which is proposed to have 3 retail office buildings in there. Why would this lot be any less adaptable to a retail office building than the lot 1, which is immediately across the street? One of those seemed to be wrong.
Well, the drawing that shows the future development of the lot to the west, that is conceptual, and we hope it will happen, or something like that will happen, but there's certainly no guarantee that that will happen. You know, again, it's a long, narrow lot. We've worked with several developers who have tried to fit something on this piece, this eastern piece, and weren't able to make it work because of the configuration of the lot and the utilities. I'm not trying to imply that nothing else could go on the lot, but I know that it has been a challenge, and with this style of building and this use, it was able to fit.
Well, I guess I scratch my head and think, well, why would I then vote to allow the replatting or rezoning for the 3 retail office buildings that are unlikely to ever happen because the lot's too thin? You know, it's either the lot's too thin for retail office and is only adaptable for a car wash, or your plat is entirely wrong and is dreaming, basically. You're never going to be able to put retail office there, and you're asking us to approve something that'll never happen. So I sit there and I say, one of those options have to be the answer, and I don't like either one of them. So.
And I think we're bordering on public hearing and council discussion for the 3rd hearing. So with that, as far as the process, tonight is public hearing. We will have council discussion the next time, and I'm sure you guys will be here, so if there's questions, we'll call you up. So I think we'll continue council discussion next time. Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much. Thanks. And the 3rd hearing on that will be at the next council meeting. That'll be council discussion and a vote. Next is item F1, Resolution R140082, a resolution to approve an amendment to the master fee schedule pertaining to sewer connection fees. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution R140082? Motion by Councilman Glover. Second by Councilman Florence. Do we have any proponents? Any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is Resolution R140084, a public hearing and a vote. A preliminary plat for the property legally described as a platting of that part of Tax Lot 8 in the south half of the southeast quarter, together with that part of Tax Lot 1 in the south half of the southwest quarter, all in Section 19, Township 14 North, Range 12 east of the 6 p.m., Sarpy County, Nebraska, generally located northeast of 126th Street and Cornhusker Road. The applicant is Woodlands Homes. This is a public hearing and a vote. I'll open the public hearing. Proponents.
John Bachman, 10250 Regency Circle, here on behalf of the applicant. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other proponents? Any opponents? Council, I'll close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution R140084? Motion by Councilman Jaworski. Second by Councilman Gaines. Council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next is item F3, Resolution R140085, a public hearing and a vote. A preliminary plat for the property legally described as a platting of Tax Lot B lying in the west half of the southeast quarter of Section 35, Township 14 North, Range 12 east of the 6 p.m. of Sarpy County, Nebraska, generally located at 78th Street and Highway 370. The applicant is Tornado Wash Papillion, LLC. Public hearing and a vote. I'll open the public hearing and also make mention that I'm assuming all of the comments from the prior one will carry over here. So we'll carry those forward. But do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution R140085? This is the preliminary plat. Motion by Councilman Jaworski, second by Councilman Ingberg. Any council discussion? Please vote.
Five yeas, 2 nays. Nays by council members Florence and Mumgard.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next is item F4, Resolution R140087, a resolution to approve a limited notice to proceed to Leader Construction for the Public Works Facility. Do we have a motion to approve Resolution R140087? Motion by Councilman Klug. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. I don't think any committees have met. Do we have any comments from the floor? No comments from the floor. I won't really give any comments other than just to say I think we had a really good Memorial Day. The Legion put on the event at Cedardale Cemetery in the morning. Then we had a great event at Veterans Park. So thank you for that support. The only other things, Papillion Day's coming up June 11th to the 15th, and events are picking up at Sumter Amphitheater, and we've had 2 sold-out events there in the last week. So that's going very well. Any other council comments? Mr. Jaworski.
Speaking of the upcoming Papillion Days, we are going to have enough candy, aren't we?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we have a Mr. Glover?
I just want to add to that. I will not be at the parade, so you can have my candy in case there's a shortage.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Councilman Klug, second by, who did that? Mr. Jaworski. Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
We are adjourned and the second storm's rolling in, so be safe.